What's up, everybody? This is the guys from Plant the Spear here, ready to look at this Florida State win that they got against Duke on Saturday night, a second top 25 win of this season. Michael, I saw the other day that this is actually Florida State's one of only a handful of teams that have two ranked wins on the season. So,
Yes, sir.
while there's some things in this game that you love and some things that maybe you didn't, overall, at the end of the day, Florida State remains in the top five with a big top 25 win
Yep.
over Duke, 38-20. Michael, I appreciate you joining me. How are you today, my man?
I'm good, brother. It's always good coming off of a win, especially a win in prime time where we got to showcase what Florida State's all about, man. What an environment, what that was. Even now, just thinking on Monday, thinking back to that game, gosh, man, that's what makes college football amazing. That's what when Florida State is good, college football is at its best. And I know we're biased fans, but even if I wasn't a fan of Florida State, you just have to like Florida State's just one of those iconic brands that when it's good, college football is good.
Right, and it's one of the best atmospheres on Saturday. When you look at a packed, sold out Doak Campbell Stadium that's rocking, and you got the good broadcasters in town, and just the build up to that game and everything that went into it, it
Yeah.
was really a primetime Saturday, and
Yep.
that is what it's all about. Like you said, it's just the environment that makes things different. And so when we talk about this game, we obviously celebrate a big win. That
Yep.
is without a doubt. But the fireworks did not stop on Saturday.
No, they did not. No, they
On
did not.
Sunday night, as yours truly was taking a little mountain vacation, I get back in town to check my phone, and all of a sudden, Florida State is out here flipping five-star recruits from in-state Miami. So that
Yes.
was a huge get for Florida State. We talked about this in the pregame show where it was like it was a pretty big red flag when you have
Yep.
a five-star defensive line commitment at your rival's game the night you're hosting Clemson in what's pretty much your biggest game of the season at home. So I mean, I know the Texas A&M game was big too, but the way they had Clemson in town and to see him in Tallahassee, and it ended up being the smoke was where there was smoke, there was fire, and he
That's right.
flips his commitment to Florida State. So huge get, 6'4", 250 pounds, has just recently, right before this, reclassified to the 2024 class. So you're getting a
Yeah.
guy who can make a immediate impact, and that's huge when you look about you're pretty much losing Verse. Patrick Payton could go, but I think he's going to come back for another year. So it'll give you a guy opposite of him. Michael, we're going to talk about this guy, but in 2022, as just a sophomore, I mean, I know it's high school, so sometimes a dominant player just really runs the table on some guys, but 30 tackles for loss,
Whew, man.
16 sacks in 11 games as a sophomore. I mean, that's grown man stuff.
Oh, that's more than grown man stuff. That's grown man with a 401k account and a couple of grandkids stuff. I mean, I'm just trying to be you here, Jesse, with the funny punchlines. But I mean, that boy is a man. He is everything Florida State has needed and wanted, and it puts Florida State back on the map for that elite D line recruiting. I know there's been some angst out there about legendary coach Odell not being able to recruit like he used to, but this just once again proves again that when the product on the field is showing it, we'll get the recruits. It doesn't matter. We'll get them. And Odell once again proven that Miami can go eat its own grits and do what it's got to do. But we got him. And what's great about the fact is, I mean, the man, you want to talk about just a comment that puts it in perspective. I think in his interview to announce his commitment, he said, I want to play for the coaches. I'm really love what they do, and man, I just want to play for these fans. That all these fans show up, which was basically a diss to Miami and their 3 fans that come to their games. So I just love that. I love that he wanted to be a part of the program that was going to help develop him. He talked about development a
I saw
lot,
that.
which obviously means he doesn't feel like Miami was going to develop them. And there's some scuttlebutt out there right now that basically said that when he was on campus this weekend, Miami was blowing up his phone trying to get him to hold off on the commitment, hold off on making the flip. And at one point, the scuttlebutt is that he was thinking, okay, maybe I should wait a week. But then Mike Norvell and the coaching staff, they didn't pressure him, but they just said, hey, what questions you got? They answered the questions. And then when Mike started talking about that development piece, it was over. It was done with, like signed, sealed, delivered. And he's coming in December.
Yeah, and I did see some talk about that. And apparently, Miami was spreading a little bit of untrue
Yep.
information, trying to negatively recruit FSU. But at the end of the day, I think that that's one thing that you've seen from Florida State staff really throughout their time here, the whole time. They have been very honest with recruits. They've
Yep.
been upfront. They're not shy about pointing out holes in their game where they can develop them and they can make them better. They've been honest with
Yep.
everybody. And you really do see that pay off. I mean, I know he said that he wanted to be developed by this coaching staff,
Yeah.
and he also wanted to be around these guys as men.
Yeah.
And that's something that you see when you have guys like Odell who love this program, Mike
Yep.
Norvell, who's a stand-up human being on top of a football coach. And so that's something that was crucial in his recruitment, like you said. And it really couldn't have came at a better time, because the one thing Florida State was really missing was an elite defensive lineman in this 24 class. That's what you really needed. I mean, they've had a really good hit rate in the portal. That's important. But you can't guarantee there's going to be a Jared Verse or a Jermaine Johnson out there every single year. And now you get a high school guy who's elite. Obviously, he flipped once, so you got to get him in the boat first. We'll at least put that out there. But it's a big win for Florida State. It's a big win for Odell. You went into Miami's backyard. He plays for Miami Central High School. So you went right there, right next to their campus, and shoved Mario Cristobal in a locker for a 5-star recruit. So big win for this coaching staff. And while we're talking about recruiting, now we try not to get too excited about 2025 guys. And at the same time, Armando Blunt was a 2025 guy. But to touch on it before I do say this, On3 has updated their class rankings. 247 still has Blunt listed as a 25 player, but right now Florida State did move up to 4th in the 2024 class rankings. They now have a handful of 5-stars. So if they can keep this class together, man, it's going to be really big for the future. But the 2025 commitment that you had brought up in the post-game show, Ethan Pritchard, a linebacker, 4-star. Again, what is the other thing Florida State needed in recruiting? A linebacker. So you got all kinds of wins this weekend. Obviously, like we said, 2025, you got to keep them in the boat, but you really needed some linebackers. And so you got a win for Randy Shannon on the recruiting trail and Odell, the two guys you were worried about most. It was a good weekend overall.
It was a good weekend. Good knock on the tab there for Randy Shannon. You know, again, like the biggest criticism of this staff has been recruiting high school, D linemen and linebackers. There's been the two. They've been able to get everything else. They've been able to get quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, offensive linemen, tight ends, defensive backs. They've been able to get all of that. But the two areas, linebackers and D-line, right? Like we've, for some reason in these 4 years, we've struggled to really get. I mean, Josh Farmer was I think he was a Norvell recruit class in the 2020 class. I may be wrong on that, but yeah.
But even then, when you look at Farmer, like at the time, I think he was like I'm not trying to be mean to Josh Farmer because he's a monster now, but he was kind of like a skinny little linebacker at the time.
Yes, absolutely. You're right.
Yeah, when you're talking about a high-level defensive lineman, like you said, it's been a dry spell.
It's been a dry spell. And so for them to be able to get that, to get those kids at least into the initial fold, I mean, that's big time. That shows big time recruiting prowess. And I mean, barring some epic collapse that we have at this season, I mean, barring an epic collapse, this class is going to be a top 5 class. I will put every bit of money I got, and it ain't much, on that. It's going to be a top 5 class this year. And so, Mike and the signs this class. Next year's class is going to be 2025. It's going to be even better. Like, I mean, the machine is starting again. That's what you love so much about Florida State. Like, everyone has said this. Anyone that knows anything about college football says that Florida State, basically for those 5, almost 6 years at the end of Jimbo and Taggart years or whatever, and the first 2 of Mike, everybody knows that Florida State is a sleeping giant. I mean, it just takes the right coach to wake it up. But once it wakes up, oh man.
Right. And I mean, you already reside in one of the most talent-rich states in the country. You're close to another talent-rich state in Georgia. It was just you needed to get the success on the field to sell, and you needed for certain players to take off so you could point out on film that, hey, this is what we can turn you into. And like we talked about on a previous show, you could have 10 NFL draft picks this year. So once you prove that you can be a pipeline to the league, I mean, that's why so many kids go to Alabama, because they know they're going to go to the NFL. They know they're going to get that shot. And so now you vault yourself into the top 5 in 2024 rankings. And, steam only picks up because you've
That's
seen the
right.
5 stars who go out and recruit these guys. And when you talk about Armando Blunt, On3 currently has him listed as the number 20 national player, number 3 at the position, and number 5 player in the state. So this was a huge get for Florida State. Not only, like we talked about, not only is it a huge get for you, but you stole them from Miami. And so
That's
that's
right.
even better. It's like I said before, the analogy where I said you don't have to cook with the groceries in the fridge. Well, you just
That's
walked
right.
over to Mario's house and just took his steak dinner from out of his fridge and brought it back to your house. So,
Yes, you
you know,
did.
so I love it. Anytime you can take one from an in-state rival, that just makes it even sweeter. So,
Oh, and especially Miami. Ugh.
right, you didn't even play Miami this weekend. You still found a way to beat them. So that was excellent. But yeah, guys, it's heating up on the recruiting trail, and as long as you can keep in the boat. But like you said, as long as there's no collapse late in the season or something that we just don't foresee coming, I think you're
Right.
going to finish. I think you're going to cross the finish line
Yep.
at the number as a top 5 class. So that's good to see. But we're going to go ahead and get into this Duke game. Obviously, we know it was a big win, but before we do that, guys, I'm going to just bring you a quick word from our sponsor who is bringing you today's episode, Alumni Hall FSU. They have all the FSU gear you need. That's where I got this Heritage
Nice.
Edition hoodie. And let me tell you what, it looked really good this weekend. All the turquoise that they had.
Yes,
My brother
it.
called me, who's a Georgia fan. He's like, "What's up with Florida State and the blue?" They couldn't figure it out. And so I told him, and I'm like, it's a way to honor the Seminole tribe. And so it looked really good. But,
Yes.
if you guys want to rack up on some awesome FSU gear, go to alumnihall.com/FSU or visit them at their Tallahassee location, 1817 Thomasville Road. Tell them we sent you by. Use code SPEAR, get 10% off online or in store. So we appreciate them sponsoring this episode. So,
Yes,
Michael,
sir.
let's talk about this FSU Duke game. Now, I know you were there. I know you were feeling the environment. You felt the ebbs and flows with the
Oh,
crowd.
man.
And because this game had a lot of back and forth moments on TV, at home, it was still pretty stressful, but
Yep.
you could feel the momentum swings. And that's something that's so big in college football. The momentum swings in this game were crazy. And it just
Yep.
really felt like to me in the first half, it's not that Florida State couldn't do anything. They couldn't do the things they wanted to do. They just had so many little things that kept it's just, we talked about how they fought through adversity in the post-game show. A lot of the adversity was created by themselves. But at the same time, when you talk about the missed holding calls that sprung a touchdown run, you talk about some of the other penalties that they had, a fumble that they were luckily able to recover. It just seemed like one thing after another was snowballing. And then the kickoff return really broke things open, and it was like the game changed. So give me some of your thoughts on the initial, just how the ebbs and flows of this game went, how Florida State was able to respond to pressure.
Well, I know there's a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, well, Florida State, was too hyped for the game, and blah blah blah. We took Duke to whatever." I'm like, no, guys, listen. I was there at the game. The crowd was hyped. I'll tell you what, man. There is nothing like Doak at dark. I'm gonna just tell you right now. Now, this was Duke, but this was the first ranked versus ranked game in Doak Campbell Stadium in some time, so it was a big deal.
Right.
I thought the team came out and it looked, just from watching in the stands, it looked like they were ready. They weren't overhyped. There were some things that showed up early that they didn't want to show up. I wouldn't say. Yeah, I know. I'll go right here. I when I watched back the TV copy of this, Kurt Herbstreit, I mean, he just hammered
Oh,
the
man.
defensive backs about the loafing, right?
Yeah.
He said they loafed. I watched that. I went back and watched that play like 6 times, and I didn't see loafing. I saw literally they were playing man-to-man coverage. Their eyes wasn't even on it. Like Cypress he was playing outside coverage, and his receiver went in. And so he went in and then realized that the running back had bounced it out. And so he had to literally reroute himself, which made him come from a bad angle to try to make the tackle, and then he had to follow him out. It wasn't loafing. I don't know what Kurt Herbstreit was talking about. I could speculate that ESPN has it out for Florida State, but whatever. That's for the tin hat people. But it wasn't that. I just think some things, like you said, some things showed up. They made some mistakes, which is typical. They're humans. They're not going to be perfect robots. But I thought they handled the adversity, right? What Mike Norvell talks about. They responded when they needed to. And one of the things after I was able to calm down from being super nervous that we were going to lose the game, one of the things I do when I look back on it and I watch the tape again is it was actually building. Every drive Florida State had, they were actually building upon something. Like it
Yep.
was getting there. Like even Mike Norvell talked about it in today's press conference that like you could feel like the breakthrough was about to happen, but then one
Yeah.
little thing, and then one little thing, and then
Yep.
finally it finally broke through, and then boom, right? And the kickoff, I mean, Deuce Span's kickoff return probably was the thing that lit the fire because it
Yep.
was like, oh, dude, that I'm telling you what, the crowd was like, the crowd was nervous. You could sense the nervous energy when he busted out that kick return. It was like, okay, we're gonna win this game. It's over. Like that was just the
Right.
moment.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing is it almost feels like sometimes early, and I totally agree. I don't think they overlooked Duke in any way. And this was something that I tweeted out during the game. And yes, I still call it tweeting, so
It's
it will
okay.
forever be tweeting to me. But I even tweeted out like Duke's not ranked number 16th in the country for no reason. They have
Correct.
earned that. The only game that they lost to was a Notre Dame team who looks pretty good right now.
Yep.
So again, you're just talking about a team that you knew you were going to have to strap it up and play well
Yep.
against to begin with. And then they played really well. I mean, you have to tip your hat to Duke. That's a very well coached team. They
Yep.
don't get out of assignment very often. They don't make mistakes. They let the game come to them. They pursue well, they tackle well. That's a really, really legit defense there. But I agree, man. It was like, like we talked about, it's not that it wasn't there. It's just it was always something because like you get the first touchdown run for 42 yards that was sprung on a holding call because you could see Deloach had contained.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and it was funny. We were talking pre-show where the offensive tackle even did like this, put his hands up in the air in front of the ref because that's usually a telltale sign by an offensive lineman that you're guilty and you're trying to
Yep.
make it look like you're not.
Yep.
It's like when they throw the incomplete sign and then they look at the like a DB and then they look at the ref like, oh, you didn't throw a flag, right? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So like a little thing like that. Then it just seemed like you had a 15-yard run by Benson that was called back for holding. You
Yep.
had the Kyle Morlock where he got a big catch and then it ended up being an illegal touching, which
Right.
you still ended up being 4th and 1, but that should have been 3rd and 1.
Yep.
And then that was the play where they got stopped on 4th down, gave Duke the ball deep in our territory where they were able to get 3 points out of it. Now the defense held up in that one, but it seemed like every little thing. Then you
Yep.
get the punt.
Yep.
You get the block in the back penalty, and it puts you deep. And then Jordan
Yep.
throws his first interception period in Doak in 2 years at
Yeah.
home,
Yep.
and it turns out to be a pick six. So it's like like you said, everything just kept snowballing, but you could see it was there.
It was building.
The two big missed throws by Jordan to Jaheim Bell and to Keon, where like you had the guys there, but you couldn't connect on it. And once they got that part sorted out and they calmed down a little bit, this was something that I heard them talking about where they just want to put the fun back in the game because it looks like they're pressing in the first half. To be honest, they knew it was a ranked team and they pressed a little bit, and it led to a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, people have to understand, man. Florida State has no one on that team has been in this situation. No one on that team has been 7-0. No one on that team is a 5-0 in the ACC. No one on that team has been in contention for multiple postseason awards. No one on that team is being talked about like a playoff contender. No one's used to the pressure, right? And so you come out on prime time, Doak at dark, the best ESPN announcing crew. Everybody knows what this means, and so even fans were pressing. We were pressing because we were like, we're juice. We wanted this to happen. So, I think some of that can come out in that sense too. And I also think too, like when you look back on it, for example, the throw that Jordan had where Bell was wide the heck open. Well, you thought, oh man, gosh, Jordan overthrew that. He's pressing too much. But then when you go back and watch the play, and then you hear Mike Norvell talk about it on today's press conference, Bell slowed down. Like, why is he slowing down? He actually should have kept running because Jordan actually put it in the right spot that was going to lead him. And for some reason, Bell slowed down to try to catch the ball. And so you get that. You look at the 4th down call, the first one that Jordan missed where he takes the ball. Look, what I will say, Jesse, is Mike Norvell must have watched Plant the Spear, because he went under center for that
Yep.
one. Okay, he
Yep.
sure did.
And it
But
didn't work either. So
and
I
it
guess
didn't work.
who knows? Just punt.
Just funny. But
Just punt.
Jordan, when you go back and watch it, he took the ball and he went up to the left side there, and literally he was this close,
Yeah.
this close. But the guy hit his knee, and the offensive line and didn't get the nice nice close out there, or he probably actually runs it for a touchdown. That's how much it
Yeah.
was close to breaking. The second one Mike Norvell talked about, because it was asked, because I was really curious about, like, why would you go for it on your own 38? And he said, and I the whether I agree or not, he said, the analytics say yes, because it's early in the game, and so you have the momentum at that point in time, but the play got blew up, and I'm like, okay, I mean, yeah, but okay, so let's say I agree, you go with it, but why that play call? When Duke is
Yeah.
proving that they can get past our O line right now, like,
Yeah.
that's probably not the call to go with. But you look at those things, and even he was pressing. Mike knows, he understands the moment. He knows what this
Yeah.
means, and so I think some of that probably played an effect. But again, there was never a moment where you thought, oh, Florida State's in trouble. Now, that doesn't mean you didn't think they could lose. I never thought they were going to be out of the game. I thought they just needed one thing to break their way. They needed the
Yeah.
referees to start calling the holdings. They needed the offensive line to just give them one extra block somewhere. And sure enough, when that started happening, boom, those runs started breaking.
Yeah, and it's funny when you talk about I'll talk real quick about that fourth down call, because I didn't agree with it. I don't care what the
Mm-hmm.
analytics say. I think a lot of that is also, it's early in the game. You're already down. You have an excellent punter, and you
Yep.
saw what happened when Duke pinned you deep, and you
Yep.
ended up throwing a pick six out of your own end zone. You could have done the same thing to them. Like you said, the run game was not working well enough to just hand it off up the middle at that point. I mean, they were really kind of eating your offensive line up in the first half. So to me, that one. I will die on that hill. I don't agree with that. I'm not a coach. I don't get paid $8 million a year. That's fine. But at the same time, when you bring up an interesting point about none of these guys have been in this situation where they're 7-0, really, Mike Norvell has not either. I mean, he had
No,
that great season at Memphis, but
that don't count. That don't count.
that's a different animal than
Yep.
being in the playoff and the ACC title contention at a place like
Yep.
Florida State. And sometimes I think he does press it a little bit too.
Yeah.
And I think that you can also, I think people, when they hear the name Duke, they don't think you should be in a game with a team like Duke. But it's
Right.
not the same Duke as it
Not your
was. But
daddy's Duke, man.
exactly, it's not. And I think the thing about this one is, it's just when you look at, like you said, there was so many things, the little things that seem to, it almost feels like it always, like, what, does this only happen to us? Like, we always miss so many little things. But like we said, you can tell it's there. And I mean, I even had some stats where it was like, okay, so I still don't really think it was as bad as it looked. Like you said, now I'll be honest, when they threw the pick six and they got down, I was like, okay, what are we doing, guys? We got to get our head out of our tail
Yeah.
here
Yes.
and turn this thing around. But it didn't, like you said, it didn't feel like we were getting wiped around the mat or anything like that. And when you look at the first quarter, even though Duke was up 10-7, Florida State led in yardage, 147 yards to 71. So you were
Yep.
killing them. I mean, their offense, outside of their defense, really put their offense in some good situations with the fourth down stops. But outside of that, their offense really couldn't do much of anything. I thought you had another really good day by the defense. And, like we talked about in the first half, the biggest concern for me on offense was you couldn't run the ball. And then we saw Jordan use his legs, got to open some things up for the run game. I think when we talked in the postgame show, they were averaging something like 2.5 or 3.5
Yeah.
yards per carry in the first half. So
Yeah.
it was just, it's the run game is still, there's something going on there. And the more I see it, the more I start to think the offensive line is just not really winning some battles up front, because while Trey does struggle to get going at times, we've seen Kazai do some nice things. You've seen Toafili do some nice things. So you have that depth at running back, but the running game still, it did struggle a little bit until Jordan used his legs, which obviously completely changes this offense.
Change the game. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, I'm to the point where we have a 7-game data sheet now on this team, and especially on this offensive line. And I'm almost like, this is it. I kept thinking every game, like, okay, we haven't seen the true the true nature of this offensive line. I'm to the point now where I think we have. Like they're just going to
Yeah.
struggle sometime against the run. But the thing I do love about it is that what they have proven is that late in games, every single game, late in the game, they have been able to run the ball. And I don't mean just like running Jordan, I mean run the ball.
Right.
So maybe it's just, I hate to say this because I hate this moniker, but maybe Florida State is that second half team. It
Right.
scares me because I feel like we're gonna come up against somebody that's gonna like put it on us, and we won't have, like, like last year. You look at those 3 losses we had, and the reason we lost it was we were a second half team that couldn't put it on in the first half, and we were
Right.
already blown out of the game in the first half. That second half was catching up, and we just ran out of time. So I hate that for this team. I thought they would be better. I thought they'd be a full, four quarter team, and I still think they can be, but I
Yeah.
just don't think this offensive line is going to get much better as far as run blocking. Pass blocking, I mean, they
Yeah.
were again rated. The Pro Football Focus I saw out there had them love their pass blocking again. So they did. I think they were above 85% pass blockers. So it's just that run game that just takes forever to get going in the game.
Yeah.
But again, second half, they're going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it's really a lot to do with just keep chopping, as they say. You know what I mean? Just
Yep.
keep chopping at the tree, and
Yep.
eventually it's going to fall, because you really could see in the second half. And this will lead into another point that I want to talk about. Is they wore Duke out, and
Yep.
like
They did.
Duke is up and coming. Duke is in a similar place to where Florida State kind of was at the beginning of the Mike Norvell tenure, where it's like you had some pieces, but you don't have depth yet. And that's
Right.
kind of what we saw last year. And you just saw them where Florida State has now built enough depth, especially in the trenches. That's really the two places they have the best depth. They wore them out, and they were just pushing them over towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
And you could see that's when they started to get things going. But they've also done, and I'll touch on this before I bring up the next point, they've done well with the pass blocking. So looking at it here, and the Duke defensive line was something that we talked about before this game. We were
Right.
worried because they're legit.
They're
They only
legit.
pressured Jordan Travis on 28.9% of his dropbacks. So they did pretty good. And then when you
Yeah.
flip over, just to put it in perspective, now Riley Leonard, I think, and we'll talk about this in a second, but Riley Leonard, I think it took him a while to figure out he couldn't run. And then once
Yes.
they did, they poured it on. And now they only blitzed Florida State, that is 23.5% of the time, but they got pressure on him 52.9% of
Ooh,
dropbacks.
man, let's
So
go.
they were on him all night. But the point I wanted to bring up that you said that makes it interesting here, talking about late in the game, I don't think, and I know people are going to pull this card at some point, I don't think Riley Leonard going out of the game lost Duke the game, because he was essentially ineffective for most of the game. Like, he had basically, when you look at his passing, he was he was good at running their offense. That's what they had him out there for. But when you talk about it, he was 7 for 16, 44%, 69 yards, 1 interception, no passing touchdowns. He started 1 of 7. So now let me rephrase that. If you'd had a healthy Riley Leonard, the game might have went a little different. But I don't think him going out of the game. I think at that point Florida State has already started the change, and they were coming back. And I don't think he would have stopped it. Maybe it doesn't end up being an 18-point game, but I don't think Riley Leonard going out of the game was a big enough deal to keep them. I think it's just Florida State made some adjustments at halftime, and they figured out how to get around that defense a little bit.
The most asinine thing I've heard from Saturday night to today is that Florida State won because Riley was out of the game. I've heard that talk. I've heard ESPN use it. I've heard other people use it. It is asinine. It is ridiculous. Riley Leonard does not play defense.
Right.
I'm going to say that one more time. Riley Leonard does not play defense. Riley Leonard doesn't punt the ball. Well, he can. I've seen him do it, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't kick field goals. He doesn't return kickoffs. He doesn't return punts. All he does is a quarterback. And at the time Riley Leonard was in the game, let's just remember the moment, everybody. It was third down. Florida State stopped him, sacked him, actually. And had they not pulled the face mask, they were going to punt that ball.
Yeah.
Right? It was 20-17 in the fourth quarter. Okay. Florida State already had the momentum. It was already there. You could feel it. You just knew it. One thing pops, this game is over, right?
Yep.
And we pull the face mask. So the other quarterback comes into play. right? And we stop them. We literally stop them 4 downs right there inside the red zone. They get like maybe 2 or 3 yards that whole drive once he went out. Then Florida State scores. We go up 24-20. Florida State scores again. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back. We stop them. Florida State scores again. We're up 31-20. Then Florida State scores again. And we're 38-20. I mean, Riley Leonard had nothing to do with us winning that game. Now, I heard the argument, well, like because the players were all worried. They were not worried. They knew he was hurt. They probably didn't even know he was going to play until like game time.
Right.
That didn't change the momentum of the game. They weren't winning because of Riley. Like you said, he was 7 of 16. He was barely 50%. He scrambled one time, and we misaligned on that scramble. That's why he got that 20-yard run. Outside of that, he wasn't running. We intercepted him. We sacked him. He was not the game. The game was the running backs. That was their game. That's all they had. That's all they were, holding and running backs. That was their whole game plan.
Right.
We're going to hold unless the referees call it, and we're going to run the ball. Once we wised up on that, and what was interesting is going back and watching the tape on that, there were several of those runs where literally if we don't get held, if Florida State doesn't get held, or the linebackers actually align right, they get into the right gap, this is a massive blowout.
Yeah, and obviously, like we said, if Riley Leonard had been 100% healthy, maybe it changes the game, because I think Florida State did in the first quarter. I think they played it back a little bit. They thought maybe he could run the ball, because we talked about it. He was the heart of that offense, but it was 90% with his legs. He only has 3 passing touchdowns on the season, and that continued this week. So it's just, you're talking about 7 games with 3 passing touchdowns. He's not a threat with his arm, and you saw he missed a lot of throws. Now, granted, I don't know how healthy he was, but he wouldn't have played if he didn't feel healthy enough to play. They wouldn't have let him play because they didn't let him go back in. So you can't make an excuse that he wasn't at 100%. Right. I mean, Jordan had to put his left arm in his pocket last week because it was hanging down. Like he's probably not healthy too. And I understand a high ankle sprain is more crucial to your play than your non-throwing arm. But at the same time, again, I don't think it made a difference because he was not an effect in that game. As far as going out, if he'd have stayed in the game, I don't think it would have made a difference. If he was healthy, I'll admit it probably would have made little difference. I still think Florida State wins that game. Yeah. And if they'd have had to play the backup, I think it would have been at least a probably 30-point blowout because, like we talked about, I think really the reason they let Riley Leonard play was because it was their first real, true, tough road environment, and they knew I think it was the first play with the backup. They got to delay a game or something like that. So they knew Riley Leonard could go into that atmosphere and keep his composure and run the offense at a minimum. I think that's really the only reason they played him.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and let me make a correction. I said earlier, that play where he gets sacked and injured and face mask, it was actually a first down play. It was a first down play, but it's first down from the 20, I think it was the 24, 23-yard line, somewhere around there. So they were close to the red zone, but they were only there because of a penalty that happened before that got them there, and then that sack comes, right? And so and then the other point is this is a key point in this stupid argument about Riley Leonard, is that the defense, if you take away the 3 points that I blame the offense for the dumb fourth down call. I agree with you. I would never, ever go for it on my 38, but whatever. I don't get paid $8 million either. Love you, Mike. But the offense really gave up that 3 points. The defense, kept it from being 7 points. But so if you take away that 3 points and you take away the pick 6, 7, the defense gave up 10 points.
Yep.
That whole game. And this was the Riley Leonard offense that was killing Florida State. 10 points.
Right. And that's the thing. Like you figure, okay, so, and I was looking it up earlier, FSU's defense has only given up 23 offensive points in the last 3 games because, they had the kickoff return against Virginia Tech. And I want to say it averaged out to something like the defense is giving up only 8.4 offensive points per game in the last 3 games. So, I mean, they're doing really well. They're we've just had a couple things go the other way. And, talking about the defense, so Duke had 10 total drives in this game, and they scored on the first 2. After their first 2 drives, they only had 3 points on the last 8 drives. And we talked about them being a little bit of a boom or bust offense in the preview. Yep. 5 of their drives, literally 50% of their drives, went for a combined 23 yards. So outside of a couple of penalty-assisted runs, Florida State's defense had another really good night. And I mean, you can point to the rushing yards. It's 8.6 offensive points, but you can talk about the rushing yards. They did run for a lot, but they had nothing passing. So they had to run the ball on you. That was like their complete game plan. I mean, they ran for 197 yards, 35 rushing attempts, 5.6 yards per carry. So I'm sure if you factor out, and I'm not a mathematician here, but if you factor out the 42-yard run, then maybe that probably comes down quite a bit there. But again, they had to run the ball a lot. They ran the ball 35 times, so they were trying to run the ball. That was a majority of what they do, and they only ran 57 plays, and they
Right.
ran it 35 times. So they forced the issue, and it just wasn't enough. And because that's the thing about this team, is like they might give you one thing, but they're going to take away something to do it. And they had nothing in the pass game. But so I think when you look at what they did per drive, when you step back to more of the broad view picture, and you just, it's frustrating to watch sometimes when you see these things snowball between the penalties and the little things that keep Florida State from having that type of game that we know they can have. But at the end of the day, again, we had talked about before, Florida State was realistically a kind of, and I hate to say fluky because again it happened, but a fluky pick six and a not so great play call on fourth down from being up at halftime. So like
Right.
you really, your defense had another great day, and it was really just two critical moments that cost you the lead in that game, but you were able to recover. And when you look at Florida State's offense, 10 total drives, the same number as Duke. They scored on 5, scored on the final 3 drives. And it's not like it was a fluky thing, because
Yeah.
they had one drive that was 13 plays, 85 yards for a touchdown,
Oh man,
14
that play.
plays, 96 yards for a touchdown,
Come on.
7 plays, 74
Ooh,
yards for a touchdown.
dang
So
it.
they drove it down Duke's throat.
Remember, Jesse, this is the number one red zone team in the nation. Remember, coming into the game, they'd only given up, what did I tell you? It was like 14 of 35 drives, total drives that they faced. Only 14 of them got into the red zone. Not scored. I'm just saying got
Yeah.
into the red zone, right? FSU had 50%. They had 9, 10 drives, something like that. 5 of their drives got into the red zone. They had 50%. So again, this wasn't because Riley Leonard left the game. This is because Florida
Right.
State just put it on them.
Yeah, they finally got it figured out in the second half. They got some things going, and Jordan's legs obviously were a big part of that. I mean, he
Oh
had,
man.
yeah, I mean, you look, and really, I want to say the thing about Jordan here is it started a little bit rough, but when you look at the final numbers, 27 to 36, 268 through the air, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 330 all-purpose yards, 3 total touchdowns. He had, I think it was like 2 carries for -4 yards in the first half. So
Right.
he wasn't doing anything with his legs. And then he ended up turning it on towards the end. And really, like that, I'm okay with Jordan not running the ball a lot. I don't want him to carry the ball 15,
Right.
20 times a game. No way, especially not in a game like Syracuse or Virginia Tech, that he
Right.
doesn't need to. You just need to run it enough to make other teams respect it. And you
Yeah.
could tell they probably saw at halftime that there were so many plays where Jordan, all he has to do is pull the ball, and
Yep.
it's off to the
Yep.
races.
Yep.
And I think against the tougher defenses, this is something that we're starting to see with Clemson and now Duke, where you have teams with good defensive lines. Florida State has an inability to run the ball unless they use Jordan Travis's legs. So while I don't think you're going to need it maybe against like Pitt or Wake Forest or something, you might just have him run a couple to keep the defense honest.
Yep.
When you get like to Miami or Florida or something like that, you're probably going to need him to carry the ball some, because it really
Yeah.
does change the offense. And just talking about Jordan, I I don't know that this would qualify as a Heisman moment, so to speak. But when you look at that second half, kind of the way he put the team on his back, he ran the ball, he threw it, he refused to really kind of let the moment get to him. I don't know that you can call it a Heisman moment, but it's probably one of the stronger second half performances that he's had, where you could tell it was really Jordan Travis that put this team on his back and carried them to victory, along with the defense, of course.
Yeah. I don't know what your definition, Jesse, of a Heisman moment is, or what the Heisman voters' definition of a Heisman moment. That thing is always so subjective to whoever
Right.
is making the claim that was a Heisman moment. But if it were me, I think that was a Heisman moment. I mean, your team is struggling. It's down. You can't run the ball. You're not in sync necessarily with your wide receivers. Duke is just keying off of it. They know they feel like they've got the game, and then you're just like, all right, I'm done with this, and you just put the
Yep.
team on your back. And I mean, so if he had 2 runs for -4 yards, that means he had 8 runs for 72 yards in the
Right.
second half. I mean, holy cow! He averaged 6.2 yards per carry. I mean, if that's not putting the team on your back to win the game, I don't know what
Yep.
else is. You know what I'm saying? And so, I don't know about the whole Heisman thing. Honestly, I mean, I'm sure he would love to win it. I'm sure he'd love to
Right.
get an invite. We'd love it to win it because in Florida State history, Heisman also correlates national
Right.
champions. So, there's,
Right.
there's that little bit. But again, regardless of that, the dude took over the game. I mean,
Yep.
it became the Jordan Travis show. And the thing that it proved once again is that when Florida State plays these great defensive lines, Jordan Jordan takes that offense against a great defensive line and neutralizes that defensive
Yep.
line. And that offense goes to a whole new level.
Yep.
And I would say this, Jesse, before I throw it back to you, is I, I think when Jordan runs, the the offense that we all envisioned in the preseason is what we saw Saturday night, right? And
Yep.
so we've been clamoring like, man, what's wrong with this offense? What's wrong with this offense? I think we saw what's wrong with this offense
Yeah.
because when he runs, even if it's just 1 to 2 or maybe 3 calls throughout the game that Mike gives him, where it's like, okay, Jordan, this is a read, but man, unless the DE or the linebacker is fully keying on you, keep that dadgum ball and go with it. Because when he does that, everybody sucks in. One-on-ones get open, tight ends through the middle get open. I mean, I think that's been the key this whole time.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we talked about in the preview that he is one of the most electric elite runners from the quarterback position in the country. And when
Yeah.
you don't like it's when you don't use that, you know what I mean? It's like it's just crazy. I mean, it's like having nitrous on your car in a race and then you just forget to push the button. It's like you got it right there. You just got to use it. It's a secret weapon.
Yeah.
And once he unleashed it, it was like the second half was the second half of the season 2022 Jordan Travis that we saw. That got him all the Heisman hype. That got him all those things, that all the accolades that we saw coming into the season. That's what we
Yep.
wanted to see. And that's what you saw glimpses of in the second half of that Duke game. And it's just, if nothing else, it's a good reminder to know that Jordan is still there. And that's not to say that Jordan hasn't played bad this season by any means. It's
Right.
just to see that Jordan come out, the one that takes over games, the leader, the running ability, the dual threat guy that you have. It was just so big. But I do think that it does bring up an interesting point here. I think one thing that's fun about this team is it really has been a kind of a different guy every game to step up. It's not like you have all your eggs in one basket. It's not like you're relying on one guy to be good.
Yep.
You like when you think back to Virginia Tech, it was the running game that really took that one home. When you think to Syracuse, it was Keon Coleman that took over. And I know Jordan's back there slinging the ball, but then you talk about this game. Keon only had 2 catches. Now they were
Yep.
big catches. They were very crucial at the time, but it was Jordan that took this game over. So I think
Yep.
it's cool to see that every single week it's kind of a different storyline. It's not like
Yeah.
and I don't know their whole offense, but it's not like saying, okay, well, say Texas has got Bijan Robinson and that's the reason you're good,
Right.
or
Right.
like when Auburn had Cam Newton or whatever, like that's the reason they're good. You
Right.
have so many different guys that can take over a game. The tight ends were the story in this game. We talk a lot about the receivers, and of course, prayers up for Johnny Wilson.
Yeah.
It looks like it was probably a concussion. That's what people are saying. I'm going to full on expect him not to play against Wake Forest. Good chance he probably doesn't play against Pitt because
Well,
you may not need him.
right. Yes. There's a chance he may not play, but Mike Norvell in his press conference today was actually very upbeat. He said that Johnny came out to practice Sunday night and was doing really well. So I think they're hopeful that he will play, that he'll be ready to go. We'll see how that goes. Also with who was the other one? Destiny Hill. Yeah, Destiny didn't practice that very much last week. It sounds like from what Mike Norvell said today, but he was also at practice. He was also practicing Sunday night as well too. So there could be a chance Johnny might play. Just depends on what it is.
Okay.
We're not doctors. I think
Right.
it was a concussion too. And the reason why I think it was a concussion, not because of that hit that happened when he went out, but actually early in the game, I think it was like second quarter or first quarter. He caught a ball. Like a 14-yard catch. And when he got up, the camera zoomed in and he was doing like the eye squinty thing, like
Yeah,
something
yeah,
was
I noticed
hurting.
that. I
And I was
noticed
like,
that.
man, so it must have started early in the game. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. You'll have to pass protocol and all that stuff. You have to do
Right.
all the stuff like that. I don't think they have to have him against Wake Forest, but it
No.
would be nice to have him.
Nice.
And of course, guys, do keep in mind we're doing 2 shows this week, so we can squeeze in a full-on Wake Forest preview without
Yep.
running you guys too long. So be on the lookout for that later this week. But yeah, man, I just think it's cool to see that you saw. I mean, even Marquise and Douglas had a nice kind of circus catch wrapping it around the
Yep.
leg. You saw Kyle Morlock have a few nice catches in this
Yep.
game. So the tight ends, it's like, again, you can lean on different position groups at different times when you need to. And, one of the last things I'll talk about as far as the game as a whole is like we talk about who this team has become. And we said last week that sometimes your mistakes just become your identity. It is what
Right.
it is. Like this
Right.
is a team that kind of fumbles around a little bit in the first half, and it almost has become like a second quarter thing now because they really outgained Virginia Tech in the first quarter. They outgained Duke in the first quarter. It's finding the points to go with it, which they did against Virginia Tech. They didn't do this week, but then the second half is ridiculous. And so when you talk about so far this season, when you talk about another strong second half run here, so Florida State in the second half of games so far this year, you beat LSU 31-7 in the second half. You went on a 31-0 run. The second half against Southern Miss was 35-10, and in that game you went on a 52-3 run before you got into garbage time. BC was the only game that you trailed in the second half, 14-19, but you ended up winning the game because you went on a 28-0 run. Again, a dominant run. Clemson, 17-7 in the second half with overtime included. Virginia Tech, 17-7, 22-0 run in that game. Syracuse, 24-0 in the second half. 31-0 run in that game. And finally, Duke 21-0 in the second half, a 21-0 run. So far this season, Florida State is beating teams in the second half 159-50.
Mm-hmm.
That is just bonkers. I mean, and at the same time, when you can say like they struggle a little bit in the first half because they've struggled to get things going. Really, when you look at it, LSU, they were down by 3. Southern Miss, they were up 31-3. BC, they were up by 7. Syracuse, they were down by 3. Virginia Tech, they were up 22-10. Cuse, they were up 17-3, and Duke, they were down by 3. So, really, they've trailed in 3 games so far in the first half. But when you can win the second half, like they're winning the second half, you feel good. And this is even a game where we talked about in the postgame show where we were a little bit worried that the 30-point streak might be in jeopardy because this was a really good Duke defense and things weren't. Points wise, the yardage was there, but the points weren't getting going for Florida State. But then again, in the second half, they turn it on and they hit that 30-point streak. You're now at a 13-game win streak, 13 games over 30 points. And when you can score 30 points on offense, like we said, this defense is plenty good enough for you to win pretty much every game on the schedule if you can keep up that 30-point streak. And just some of the runs they go on, man, is just it's unreal, some of the runs. So, like, that's the thing about Florida State is they can fumble around with the best of them, but when they turn it on and it's showtime and they know their backs are against the wall and it's time to go out and put on the second half, man, they get it done. And that's really you got to love it.
Well, and the thing is this is 2 points I want to make. I mean, if you break down the scoring for every quarter, we're winning every quarter. I mean, so in the first quarter, we have an average scoring. Let me see. We're winning by 4.7 points. So we score about 9 points. Opponents score about 4 points. In the second quarter, I looked this up. We're scoring about 10 points. The opponents are scoring 7 points. In the third quarter, we're averaging 10 points. Opponents are averaging 4 points. In the fourth quarter, we're averaging 12 points, and the opponents are averaging 3 points. So if you break it down by quarter, we're winning the games. Now we're starting slow, and then the second thing is this is nuts. This is what I love so much about this. Kudos again to Adam Fuller. Duke was winning 10-0. From that point on, Florida State went on a 38-10 run.
Yeah. They just have insane runs in these games where, like, when you turn it on, I mean, it's just they're unstoppable. And I think, too, like, once you saw in the second quarter of this game, talking about the defense, it was like once they figured out Riley Leonard was not going to be mobile.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just they poured it on, and
Oh,
they
they
were
ate.
on top of him. And I
Yeah.
mean, it was nice to see. They put him under pressure, and he
Yep.
was not comfortable under pressure. He couldn't really do anything. A shout out also to Shaheem Brown, who had a
Woo.
big pick in this game,
Right.
beautiful pick. Which again, you talk about that big kickoff return, like that
Yeah.
sparked things. And then the very next drive, you go out and you get that interception,
Yep.
and at that point, it was a huge momentum change.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
like we said, as we get ready to wrap this up, man, it's just this is who Florida State is. Like it's going to
We
be a
are.
little bit stressful in the first half,
Yep.
but then they're going to pull it together. Now, like we talked about, it just becomes a question of you don't want to find yourself in a hole you can't dig out of,
Right.
and you just got to make sure that you can stick with that second half deal. That's not a guarantee in every game, but
Right.
that's just it is what it is. But as long as they keep winning, you really can't be mad at it. Of course, obviously, there's some things that it would be nice for them to clean up once you talk about getting into playoff caliber teams, but
Right.
I just think it's nice to be 7-0, and as sometimes as things get frustrating during the game while you're watching it, at the end of the game, you still covered the spread. You still beat them by 18 points. It was still
Absolutely.
right. I want to say too. Now, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it was Florida State might have been the only team in the country that's beat two ranked teams by multiple scores or something like that, by
Oh, wow.
over 14 points or whatever. So again, I mean, like I said, when you look at it, when the lights come on and at the end of the day, when it's crunch time, this team gets it done, and they
Yep.
don't fold under pressure. They don't start pointing fingers. They know they're good. They know they're capable of coming back, and they trust the process and they trust each other, and they get it done.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I saw a stat, I think it was yesterday, that Florida State is only one of 5 or 6 teams that have 3 wins versus ranked opponents this season. Or I'm sorry, 3 wins versus
Power
top
five.
Power 5 schools, and then obviously 2 that were ranked. And so, this whole notion that Florida State would be left out of the playoffs if they were undefeated is a bunch of whatever malarkey, if you want to use that word. I just this team is a good team. And what is great about it is that, again, you see the building blocks. Like, they're going to be a team that's going to have, a couple of drives here or there that you're just like, oh, what are we doing here? But for the most part, they've proven over and over again that when it matters, they will come through. Now, I would love for them to not have to play sometimes with their backs up against the wall. And then
Right.
I like to put teams earlier backs up against the wall, but they've proven that they can do that. And going back to the beginning of what we said at the top of the show was, no one on this team has been there. Right.
Right.
So they're all coaching staff, players, they're all learning what it's like to have that type of target on your back and still try to play well, right? And so we go into Wake. We'll do our show. We'll have our Wake preview for you later in the week here, but we're going into Wake. Let's go into Wake. Let's go into Snuggy Hill, a place that has been in the past hard for Florida State to win at for some odd reason. And let's go on our ACC revenge tour, kick some tail. Then let's focus on Pitt. Then we'll
Yep.
worry about Miami, then North Alabama, then Florida. One game at a time, guys.
Yep.
We get there. We do what we need to do. Florida State does what we need to do. And one day we're all going to wake up and see our name on the college football playoffs, because that's the goal.
Right. And hopefully that is the case. And they do seem to be working some things out every week. And
Yep.
really, I think it's just the story so far has been the defense for one, and then the offense as not smooth as it looks sometimes. And I guess that's the only way to describe it. It just doesn't look smooth.
Yeah.
But again, you're at 13 games with 30 plus points. So I think you've also been really good at special teams, which is nice too.
Yep.
And when you look at the advanced rankings, so Florida State now comes in at 9th. And when you talk about complementary football, their offense is 12th and their defense is 13th. So, and to go one even further, their special teams is 11th. So they're 11th, 12th, and 13th right there. I mean, so you're good. You're even across the board. Like we said, it may not look beautiful all the time, but at the end of the day, you're holding opponents to less points than you. You're putting up 30 plus points a game. And outside of one kickoff return in the Virginia Tech game, your special teams has been excellent. So,
right.
Again, now I will say, to be perfectly honest, Duke is a great team. They deserve all the credit in the world. They fell to 23rd in the advanced rankings. Their defense is 16th. Duke is not Michigan. Duke is not Ohio State. Duke is not Georgia. So
No.
you have to clean up some of these things before you
Yes.
get to the
Yes.
playoffs. But I think the rest of your schedule, that Miami game looks, and of course, like you said, one game at a time, but we'll do a quick talk about the road ahead here. You feel good about Wake Forest. You feel good about Pitt. You still got to go earn both of those wins.
Yes, you have to.
That Miami game looks a lot bigger now. Of course, man, the wheels are falling off in Clemson.
Ooh.
It is going from bad to worse up there.
Did you see?
And
Did you? Sorry to interrupt you
the
there,
post
but
game comments,
oh my gosh,
that's
where they asked him about having psychologists, and he goes, "Yeah, but I'm not even gonna say it because it's terrible."
yeah, it's just bad look, man. And I don't think it's really going to get much better because right now, and I hate to pile on the guy, but he's not our quarterback. But Kate Klubnik is just he's not it, and he's turnover prone. He makes some bad decisions, like the play that essentially ended the game was supposed to be a straight handoff. He kept
Yes.
it, just trying to play hero ball. And the thing is, like they ran DJU out of there,
Yes.
and if they have DJ, who knows? They might not be in the position that they're in now. But the problem is they got no one to turn to
No,
because
they don't.
he is their guy. So they could. I mean, they still got North Carolina on the docket. I think they haven't played Notre Dame yet.
Nope.
So like they could end up. They
Well,
could
and
be in the Gator. They could be in a Tax Slayer Bowl this year.
maybe not even the Tax Slayer Bowl. Maybe
Yeah,
what is that bowl out in New Mexico?
yeah. If they even make a bowl, I mean, they might be in the Walk-Ons Bowl. They're in trouble right
That's
now.
right.
And
Well, and I was gonna say too, I went back and watched that play because I was curious at how to work what he said that was supposed to be a straight handoff. This is just the kicker. I know we shouldn't laugh at him because we were there once, but literally he hands that ball off. They go to a third overtime. Like it's
yep,
wide open for the running back. What was he
yeah,
thinking?
I know it was. They got some problems there, man. They are turnover prone. That offense can't get going. Their defense is still pretty good, but it's not great. And I mean,
And I'll
I
say this.
love I love watching it. I think it's funny to watch.
Yes, it is. And I'll say this to all you Clemson players out there and your coach doesn't believe in the transfer portal and you're really good. Listen to me. You're not getting developed at Clemson. I mean, you had the number one quarterback come in and he doesn't look any different than he did last season. Come to Florida State where you get developed.
Right, your coach might not believe in the portal, but you can. So,
That's right.
and I think that's another thing too that's really going to put the fire under Dabo this year. And I don't think he's going to get fired, but I think they
Yeah,
might not have a really long leash for him. I think the stubbornness to not use the portal is going to become an issue. It's going to become
yeah,
a big talking point. He's going to have to change, or the noise is going to continue to get louder.
yeah,
And I think it's interesting to see. Everybody like it discredits maybe that win a little bit there. I still think winning in Death Valley is obviously still hard. They were on the road in double overtime. When you look at their losses, it was game one against Duke, who we know
right.
is a good team, on the road at night. Then you lost at home in overtime to the number 4 team in the country.
Correct.
And then, Miami, I'm not going to say they're good, but they're not bad either. You
They got
lost
a good
on the
defense.
road. Right.
Yeah,
They lost on the road in double overtime. So it's not like Clemson is terrible. It's just,
right.
they're just not there. But I think it just, when you look at the schedule going forward, you should be favored in the rest of your games. But you got a couple of tough ones there. But yeah, man, it's interesting to watch the way things are developing in Clemson, and then North Carolina, of course. That was just an
Man.
absolute embarrassing loss. I think it was, I don't know, man. It's good and bad in a way because maybe you wanted North Carolina to be high ranked when you hit the ACC
Yeah.
championship, but at the same time, you are now the last undefeated team in the ACC. So
Yep.
basically, you control your own destiny. All
That's
you have
correct.
to do is win the games on your schedule, and you're good. And to be honest, as much as it would not bode well for your main goal, which is always, of course, at a place like Florida State, you can say what your goals are not, but we know at FSU, a
Right.
national championship is the standard every year. That's what you're
Absolutely.
shooting for. But to be honest, you could even lose a game now. If you were to lose an ACC game, you're still in the ACC championship
Correct.
as long as you keep winning. But obviously, you don't want that to be the situation.
Correct.
But you control your own destiny. So it's kind of, and I think that's what gets back to, you still won by 18 points over a top 25 team. So that's a good win no matter which way you
Right.
slice it up. But as the college football season progresses, and it's funny, we actually talked about on the instant reaction show, it was late, but the game is still not finished because Pac-12
Right.
after dark. That Washington team, where we talked about them being trailing Arizona State at halftime, I think it ended up being 15-7. So
Yeah, they
like
barely won that game. Yeah.
it was close. So man, now I think it really speaks to where you see every week someone slips, someone has a really close call. So at the end of the day, as long as you can just survive and advance, that's all that really
Yeah.
matters. Because as long as when the chaos goes down and you're standing there and you're the
Yep.
only one that didn't, crumble,
That's
you're
right.
gonna be good to go. And that's what we're hoping for the rest of the season.
Well, yeah, I mean, gosh, that was 15-7. Geez Louise. Like again, there Washington is at home. What did I say on the instant show? What did I say? I had a feeling, and sure enough, like everybody, every top 25 team struggled. Texas struggled with Houston on a controversial call. Oregon struggled with Washington State. Washington struggled with Arizona. Oklahoma struggled with UCF. Virginia, North Carolina got beat by Virginia. Tennessee was up 20-7, and then Alabama barely, or not barely, won by 14 at home. Auburn struggled with, or Ole Miss struggled with Auburn. USC lost again to Utah. Like it was just one of those days like that happens every single year. And so
Yep.
Florida State did what it was supposed to do when those days happened. It found a way to win the game. A win is a win is a win. And last thing I'll say to this is if you go back and look at the 2014 team, right? That was a team that had come off a national championship. They knew they were better than every team they faced. They knew they were better. And so they lollygagged through the games. And then when it mattered, they turned it on, right? And I will go to the grave that they should have beaten that Oregon team, but
Yep.
they lollygagged too much and it came back to bite them that one time. This team reminds me parts of 2014, meaning they're good. They're a
Right.
good team. They know they're good. The difference is they've not won before, so they don't know. They're learning in the process of how
Right.
to be dominant, right? Where that 2014 team knew that all they had to do was just flip a switch and they were going to be dominant. This team is learning how to be dominant while they're building this dominant team.
Right, and I think that's a good point because you talk about like this is what the portal does. This is the modern era of college football where you can go from being 5-7
Yep.
to a 10-win team to now competing for the playoffs. Whereas, like you said, when you talk about 2014, they had a really good season in 2012. They
Yep.
had obviously the undefeated, so that program had got rolling. They knew what was ahead of them. They
Yeah.
knew how good they were. But I think this team is kind of like watching if you it's like if you let 2013 play half the game and then 2014 play half the game. It's like 2014 plays the first half and then 2013 comes in and plays the second half. And that's really
Yes.
kind of how it looks. But I will say, as we get ready to wrap up, I will say the one thing about this team and the way that some of these games have went. You've seen them come out and just kick the teeth out of a few teams. You've seen them struggle and have to come from behind and earn it. I do think that is good when you talk about the long run, when you maybe
Yeah.
get into a game, maybe it's a playoff game and you find yourself down by 7 or 10 points at halftime or something like that. You've been in that situation. It's not
Right.
like the first time you've had to deal with adversity. And so you're able to look back at this time, say, hey guys, remember that time we were trailing in this game and we came back, we took no for an answer.
Right.
And I even heard, I believe it was Fabian Lovett who like stood up in the locker room at
Yes.
halftime of this
Yes,
game and
he
was like,
did.
this is not us. Let's probably some words we don't want to say on YouTube so we don't get flagged as not being a family friendly show, but
Right.
but that's what you need. You need them vocal leaders to step
Yeah.
up in that crunch time. And that's what they did. And they ended up rebounding in the second half and got the win. And so
Absolutely.
it's just great to see Florida State get another win. And again, like we talked about, I know this is not a Duke team that you associate with being dominant at football, but it's a top 25 win that you can stick in your cap. And it's one of the best teams on your schedule. So getting that win by 18 points, covering the spread was huge.
Yes,
And
it was.
I think it's really going to build on things going forward as we get ready to travel up to Wake Forest next week. And hopefully we can go on an ACC revenge tour because this is a game that I've had circled
Oh, yeah.
pretty much the entire season. Now, a lot of it, when we're going to do a preview, a lot of it's going to depend on who comes out at quarterback for Wake Forest. They played like the water boy last week or something like that. Who knows? So it was kind of crazy, and they still won. They still beat Pitt, so that tells you how bad Pitt is. But
Yeah.
you're going to have to go up there and earn it. But I'm excited. We'll be back later this week to preview that Wake Forest game because at this point in the season, when you're 7-0 and you're top four, every game is big. You can point to Miami, you can point to Florida, but every game is big because you you don't want to give them a reason to leave you out at the end of the year
Yeah,
in any way, shape, or form. So every game's big, and that's why
absolutely.
we're gonna be back this week to preview that weight game. So, Michael, before we get out of here, my man, any final thoughts as we get ready to close the chapter on Duke and get ready to move on to Wake Forest?
Yeah, just again, Florida State fans, let's be excited. We're 7-0. We're undefeated in the ACC, undefeated in the nation, fourth ranked team in the country. Recruiting's going well, coaching's going well. I mean, these are the days we used to dream about a few years ago. We look at all these other teams and we just be like, man, can't wait to get back to that. Well, we're here. Let's enjoy it. Let's not get so caught up and wrapped up in the small nuances of the game. That's why we give money towards paying coaches like Mike Norvell and them to
Yep.
worry about that as well. And again, I'm excited. Let's go Noles.
Yeah, definitely. And as we get out of here, I will say someone said when I questioned the fourth down call on Facebook, they were like, we're a second half team. Why question? I'm like, look, man, we're going to talk about the whole
Exactly.
game. I mean,
Exactly.
we're going to talk about the whole game, not just forget what happened in the first half because they had a good second half. We're going to talk about the whole thing.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we're piling on. It doesn't mean we're like,
Nope.
oh, Florida State sucks or anything like that.
Exactly.
We are one of the most positive shows out there. But like you always say, you got to call a spade a spade. So it
That's
is
right.
what it is. We're going to talk
It
about
is
the
what
whole
it
thing,
is.
but I'm excited to be on the ride, man, or excited to be on the climb,
Let's
as we
go.
should say. So with that being said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us here. Check out that Wake Forest preview coming in just a couple days. We're going to record that
Yep.
on Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, check out plantthespear.com. Michael's game wrap is up. Go check that out. And we'll be back with you guys shortly. So thanks for tuning in, and go Noles.